Hello. The following is a conversation with Susan Nicholls, Audrey Driscoll, and Mark Paxson, and we're talking about writer's block.
Writer's block for me, I think I have to feel passionate about what I'm writing. And lately, I haven't really had anything that I feel that intensely passionate about. I'm a person who talks with my hands and things of But I think that fear of success and fear of failure are two things that work on my mind. So I guess fear, period. Fear of success in that if I do it and I'm good at it, there will be expectations on me that I have to meet. And traditional publishers, authors know that. You know, if you've written one good book and they like it, you may have to produce one good book every 3 months based on your contract. And being an indie author, I'm not putting that kind of pressure on myself. But then there's fear of failure. Like if I write something and nobody likes it or I get criticized, I've gotten a little better about that. I've grown alligator skin so that I've learned to take the criticisms with a grain of salt, or maybe if there's something that somebody doesn't like, there's probably something to that and I need to reconsider. You know, if there's an issue, I need to stop and pause. Um, Especially if more than one person or several people have the same complaint. But I think that's where my writer's block comes from. It's just fear.
What do you try to do about it?
Well,
Address.
unfortunately, in the past really 5 years, I have not written much of anything. And I got away from writing for a little while. Mark, you know this. We had a young man that was living with us and he was killed. And that just sent me into a really bad depression. And I got away from blogging. I got away from everything. And I just went 100% mental into the Pokemon Go game.
Into what?
Pokemon Go game.
Oh yeah, that's right. I remember that.
And I mean, you know, Central Florida champion on the leaderboards and the old lady out there playing Pokemon Go at 3 o'clock in the morning. I won't tell you the stories behind that, but no, I just quit writing. And to get back to it has been a real challenge because I go back periodically and I read my reviews on Naked Alliances and I have 8 chapters of eight books started, 8 more books started. And I have 1 to 4 chapters in 8 books in the series. That's where I'm sitting. And I don't know what I'm going to do with them. I don't know if I'm going to develop them into something else or if I'm going to start over now that we've left Orlando, because we were in Orlando in that series and now we're out on the little island in the Gulf, and I don't know if I want to move Richard and Brandy out here, and I'm trying to figure out what part Brandy could have in the community life. So it's been a challenge. It's a small town community. Everybody knows everybody. You know, I want to write about people and have them recognize themselves.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. Writer's block. I think too that success can be a big motivator for people. I know, Mark, you mentioned, I don't know if it was the last meeting or the one before that you had entered a contest. And I think that those can be really good motivators. And it was for me to do the sleuth test thing because once I got the book out there and saw that people did like it, it was highly motivating for me to push forward with getting it published, even if I had to do it myself.
Yeah.
So I think little successes are big motivators.
I think that's one of the things, and I didn't think about this when I thought about what I was going to say today, but one of the difficulties is writing frequently is a very long-term effort without any feedback. And not getting feedback can make it a challenge to keep going. At least for me. I don't know about, the rest of you. Audrey, how do you?
Well, see, I didn't think I ever had writer's block. To me, writer's block is when you want to write, you're sitting there, you're ready to write, you have something in mind you're intending to write, but you just can't get started. And maybe because everything you write seems like crap. So I always pictured a blocked writer as being the guy who's sitting there. This was with the typewriter, of course, with all those little balls of scrunched up paper all around him. And he just couldn't do it, and it was agony, and I've never had that. My problem that's close to that is when I have a project in mind, but it's more like writer's reluctance. Like I don't get to the point where I'm sitting down and doing it. But other than that, I mean, if I have all the elements, we talked about this last time, if I have all my plot elements, my characters, and I have an end in sight, and I actually make myself sit down and write, and I do my first drafts by hand, which means that I don't go and read the stuff over and think this is crap. I just don't read it at all. I just power through until the end. And then I take that chunk of paper and I sit down with the computer and I key it all in, making changes as, seems necessary. And I haven't ever had thank God, the thing where I'm typing away on this and thinking this is crap. So I've always finished. I don't have any unfinished works. I have things I haven't started yet, but I don't have partially written things I've abandoned. Now, my second to last book, She Who Comes Forth, the one set in Egypt, I did kind of start it, and then I left it sitting there for probably a year or so until I kind of made a decision. I'm going to finish this sucker. And that's when I kind of made a deal with my then critique group. I said, I'm going to have a chapter every month because we met once a month. And I actually managed to do that, and I got the book done. But that, so far, is my experience of writer's block is not, because to me, once you sit down and start writing, like even with the pen on paper, you're kind of taking the stuff in your head, which is just imaginings and thoughts and, sort of non-solid things, and you're solidifying them. And as soon as they're solidified, then to change them is work. Because you eliminate a whole bunch of choices once you start writing something. And that to me is scary. And that I think is why I'm reluctant to start sometimes. It's like jumping off out of a plane and wondering if your parachute is going to do this job, So that's for me is what writer's block looks like. But if I'm not intending to write anything, then I'm not worried about the fact that I'm not writing, If all I'm writing is blog posts and I'm kind of between books, that's okay. But if I have a book that I want to get out and I just can't push myself to the point where I take that leap, that's what it looks like for me. Okay. What about you, Mark? You said you have a terrible problem writing.
Well, so as I said before, for about the first 10 years of my time as a writer, I wrote a ton of stuff. I wrote 2 novels. I wrote long stories, short stories, all sorts of stuff. And towards the end of that 10 years, I had other ideas for novels, and I started a handful of novels, got to a certain point, and just got bogged down on every single one of them. So I now refer to the half dozen half-completed novels that I have that are still just sitting there waiting to be finished. The Irreparable Past was one of them. The Dime is another one, and I just finished The Dime a few weeks ago. But what happened is it's a range of factors. I had a job that was incredibly stressful and grew more stressful with every year and grew to be more and more something that I didn't want to do, that wasn't me. every year, but it is a job that I needed to have to provide for my family. And then you combine that with the family trauma of trying to raise two teenage boys to become adults and all of the things that go into the family trauma and drama. And basically what it came down to was, and I didn't ever say this publicly or out loud when it started and as I've gone through all this, but for the last 6 or 7 years, I've just had major depression. That's what it comes down to. And the stress of the job and the stress of the family life left me, all I wanted to do when I came home was as little as possible. So the idea of sitting down and writing a story or making progress on a story was just almost impossible. One of the things one of you alluded to was, the internal editor. That was another element of this, is whenever I did try to sit down and make progress on a story, I could write a sentence or two or maybe a paragraph, but once I got just a few words on the page, that voice was in there telling me it was complete crap. And why was I wasting my time? The other thing is it comes down to something that we talked about the last time also. What's your objective? And after the success that I had with Bridgeport, and then not having success with the things that I published afterwards, is in terms of how I define success. Like, why am I doing this? Am I really going through all of this difficulty in terms of trying to write something so that 100 people might read it? Is that what I'm doing? Is that why I'm doing it? And I struggled for years with what's the purpose of doing this? And I think I've overcome that. I still want to write. I want to write for the sake of writing and publishing them and just, going back to what I did with Bridgeport, publish it and see what happens. But I retired, as I think all of you know, I retired earlier this year, so that has reduced the stress significantly. Both of my boys are, while not where I wish they would be, they're still doing better. So a lot of the stress and the anxiety and the worry has kind of gotten less, and I feel like I'm getting more freed up. And then, what happened with the dime, I wrote the second part and had my editor person read it, and he highly, very strongly encouraged me to write the third part and try to get go the traditional publishing route. And suddenly with that encouragement and those words, I wrote 22,000 words and finished part 3 in 4 or 5 weeks. So, I mean, I think there's writer's block with a little W and a little b, and then there's writer's block with in all caps. And I think Susan is probably dealing with writer's block in all caps, and that's what I was dealing with for a long time too. But I'm hoping it's breaking free a little bit now. And the big thing now, I'm where you are, Audrey, where sitting down and starting something can be difficult on its own, and that's where I'm at now. What's the next thing I move to? And while I ponder that, I'm not doing anything, and I'm not figuring out how to just kind of make the choice and get started on the next thing.
Yeah, I'm in the position now where I've got a bunch of notes and a bunch of ideas and sort of a plot for a sequel to She Who Comes Forth. I don't know why it needs a sequel, but somehow it seems like my brain has told me, yeah, it needs a sequel. Better write that. So I've kind of gotten together some of the elements for that, but I haven't gotten to the point where I'm going to sit down and actually start in on something, because the plot isn't, I don't know, it seems like every now and then I keep thinking, this is dumb. How are we going to get from this point to that point? There's no logic to it. And so I'm kind of arguing with myself. I wouldn't call that being blocked. I think being blocked is when you got a project and you're all ready to do it and you just somehow can't get it off the ground. And I'm not there yet, so or at least that's what I'm telling myself. Yeah.
How about you, Bertrand?
I have had a sort of writer's block, I guess you could call it. Unlike Audrey, I have many things that are incomplete or just abandoned, or even some things that I wrote that were complete, but that after writing them, I realized, oh, that's not actually any good, so I just left it. I've certainly had periods like where I wanted to write something, and I would try writing a variety of things, and I would end up sort of like Susan was talking about, with a bunch of like a first few chapters of one thing and a first few chapters of something else, and they would come to nothing after a while. The positive side that I've discovered of this is that eventually, when things like that pile up, sometimes I'm able to combine them. Like, Mark, I know you know this story, but like with my novel, The Directorate, I wanted to write a story about a space elevator, and I had this other story about a woman named Teresa Gannon who's a soldier. And at some point, while I was thinking about writing a story, I said, "Oh, I could combine these two things." And at that point, it came together, and I could write a coherent story. But that took years of not of having just incomplete ideas sitting around before that occurred to me. So I would say that was a period definitely of writer's block for me.
Yeah, it can take me a couple of years to get to the point where I start, which is why I'm not putting any pressure on myself with this next one.
Susan, do you do anything to try to figure out how to get started again, or?
I talked a couple of weeks ago maybe about being a pantser or being an outliner, whatever they call that. I forget the right term. And one thing I do, and I do not do it with Red Color and Roses, because that book was almost like stream of consciousness. It was just from here to there. But with the crime novel, you have to plot things out, and you have to know what's going to happen way over here. Uh, 3 chapters ahead of yourself. You've got to kind of know and you have to do an outline, and you have to keep things organized. So, I do character profiles, and I set them up in Scrivener with photographs of people I have pulled off the internet, so that I can look at this person and have this mental image of who this is in this book, like the Dragon Lady. I have a mental image of who I'm dealing with in that character. And so I have started just very, very recently setting up character profiles for some people kind of here in the islands in different characters. And my husband and I have discussed, what characters we need to have here in the continuation of this book, in the series, and how Richard is going to get from, Orlando to here, based on some of his personality traits that he had in Orlando. So I haven't abandoned it. It's in my head, but the writer's block is still there, whether it's in my head or not, because I haven't committed to putting the first 1,500 words on paper, or computer, whatever, but I haven't committed to anything yet. And that's the part that scares me. If I go on my blog and I say, well, I've started this book, then suddenly there's these expectations for me to finish it. And I'm not ready for that. I'm not ready for the commitment. Not yet.
So what you just mentioned is interesting, because my first job out of law school, I wrote administrative decisions. I was it was like being a judge, but very low level, didn't wear a robe, didn't have a gavel, that type of thing. And the woman who proofread all of our decisions for like style and editing, punctuation and that type of thing, when I started writing, I remember having a conversation with her at one point, and telling her about something that I was working. She said, "So Mark, don't tell people what you're working on, because that will, and it may not be expectations in the other people, but suddenly once you tell someone that you're working on something, then that expectation becomes something in your head." And the funny thing is she was absolutely 1,000% correct.
My grandfather always told me, do not start what you cannot finish. And that has set with me all of my life.
Yeah.
And I just won't start it if I don't feel like I'm in a position to really commit to getting it accomplished. And right now I have my artwork and it gives me instant gratification. And I absolutely deplore marketing. So don't ask me how I'm going to sell all these pictures that I have painted, because I hate marketing artwork as much as I hate marketing books.
Yeah.
Which I guess that's not a nice thing to say, that I hate marketing.
No, most of us do.
Yeah, I don't even really do it. Well, very little. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one of the things I wanted to do was see if, to the extent any of us have had problems with writer's block, and have been successful at getting out of it, what words of wisdom we might have for writers who might be dealing with this. And I have two thoughts. One is, and I mentioned earlier that there's, lowercase writer's block and uppercase writer's block. And when I first started writing, I had a case of lowercase writer's block. I started writing Bridgeport at the beginning of November, and I wrote, I think, 20 or 25,000 words over the course of the next couple of months. And then I didn't write anything at all for about 3 or 4 months. And I figured out why. It was because back then we didn't have any laptops or tablets, and my boys were 8 and 6 years old. And in order for me to write, I had to go into our office and write. And I was therefore removed from my family life. And after doing that for a couple of months, I didn't want to do it anymore. So it took me a few months to figure out, I'll buy a laptop. And with that laptop, I was able to go wherever they were going. If they were in the backyard playing in the pool, I could sit on the patio and write while they were playing in the pool, and take a break every once in a while and jump in the pool with them, or sit on my recliner and write while they were in the family room, and all sorts of other things. So that was one solution to that situation. But then the all caps writer's block of the last few years, I think it comes down to identifying what the root causes are of the writer's block and figuring out what it is. Taking a break, removing yourself from it for a little while, take the pressure off of you, and try to, again, there's something that's causing it. Whether it's, Susan's not sure if she can, find something that she's passionate about to write again, or me and my, emotional drama of my life, or just a reluctance to sit down and start. I don't know. I mean, I think it's important for people who are dealing with it to try to figure out what it is that's really causing it.
That's if you really need to write. I mean, maybe it could be even with some of us that we don't like, we keep, now that we're blogging and reading, stuff, reading blogs by writers and listening to other writers and just being a writer must write. But what if we don't have anything to say? That's more fundamental. So
I'm really busy living life right now.
Yeah, there's that too, life.
Yeah. I mean, you just survived a hurricane.
A category 1, that doesn't even really count.
It
could have flooded, but
yeah,
we didn't, so that's good. But Greg and I have been talking recently about pulling these characters together. Greg is my husband, by the way. But
very much a full partner in everything you do.
everything I do, I love to see anything else. We have a really good relationship. But more than that, he makes me laugh, and that's part of his job with this book. Some of the off-color humor in this book came right out of his head. I'm not a comedian, and I'm the serious one, and he's the crackpot. And but now I've been around him so long that I'm starting to pick up a lot of his uh, ways of thinking about things. And we passed around a couple of ideas, and we've got some thoughts about where we could go with the book if we decided to do that again. And I'm going to be quite honest with you and frank here. Today is my birthday, and I am 60 years old, and my brain doesn't work like it did when I was 55 or 50. That's just the honest to gospel truth. And I will have phrases that I need to put on the paper, and it's there, but I can't find the right word. And that's kind of a form of writer's block because, I know what I want to say. I know the message I want to get across. The words, it's hard to explain, but the words are right there, like on the tip of your tongue, and you can't find them. And I will start tossing words out at Greg, and he'll say, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that's what I meant to say. He knows me well enough to know where I was going with that, but I think that's part of age. Of course, it could be other things too. I've had some medication changes recently that were really strange. So, there's a lot of things going on.
Yeah, there is that too. Our brains don't work as well as they do the older we get. That can cause problems in trying to
Stay focused.
Yeah, stay focused, maintain the story. More and more, my fingers type. I have words in my head, but something happens between here and the fingers and the keyboard and the screen, and it's like I meant to say alligator. Why does it say elephants and it's like it's amazing sometimes.
Even Anne Rice, who I love dearly, and I've read everything she's ever written, everything, even the crappy stuff that she wrote, and her Jesus books, everything she's ever written. I just love her writing style. I'll never be able to write like that, but I love her writing style. And what is she now, 83 or something like that? I don't know. She still writes so eloquently. So I guess if it's been in your rhythm of your life, it would just come naturally, like riding a bicycle. But I never got to that point.
Yeah.
Well, it's supposed to be good for your. I figure if nothing else, writing is good for your brain.
Yes, it is.
Making up plots and keeping your characters straight and thinking of new ways to express things. I mean, that even if no one ever reads the stupid book, the whole project, the process of thinking it up and executing it, and even the editing, formatting, publishing it, and whatever stabs at marketing you take they're probably beneficial for you if nobody else. And in the end, you have the book out there. So how can you lose, really?
You have a really good point about writing for yourself and not worrying about other people. And I want to share this little thing that Kurt Vonnegut wrote, and it hit me right in my heart. But he says, when I was 15, I spent a month working on an archaeological dig. I was talking to one of the archaeologists one day during our lunch break, and he asked those kinds of getting to know you questions you ask young people. Do you play sports? What's your favorite subject? And I told him, no, I don't play any sports. I do theater. I'm in the choir. I play the violin and the piano, and I used to take art classes. And he went, wow, that's amazing. And I said, oh no, but I'm not any good at any of them. And he said something then that I will never forget and which absolutely blew my mind because no one had ever said anything like it to me before. I don't think being good at things is the point of doing them. I think you've got all these wonderful experiences with different skills, and that all teaches you things and makes you an interesting person, no matter how well you do them. And Vonnegut said that honestly changed his life. He said, I went from a failure to someone who hadn't been talented enough at anything to excel, to someone who did things because I enjoyed them. And he said he had been raised in such an achievement-oriented environment, so inundated with myth of talent, that he thought it was only worth doing things if he could win. And I read that recently, and it just hit me right in my gut, because I'm not sure that I was always writing for myself. I think I was writing to please my readers. I got real caught up in the blog, and I have had it drilled into my head, you must please your reader audience. This is part of blogging. Please your reader audience, and keep your audience in mind. And if you're in this genre, you have to write this way. And if you're in that genre, you have to write that way. And contemporary readers want to see fast-paced writing. They don't want to see, and so I got all caught up with what I was supposed to do, and then I didn't enjoy it anymore.
Yeah, well, and I think that gets to, some of the things we've talked about. What's your objective, and whose expectations are you trying to fulfill? Your own, or somebody out there who may not even ever read your book?
Right. And I think I got to get back to pleasing myself and doing it for the fun of it, or I'm not going to do it, because I'm retired now and I do things for the fun of it. I was fishing an hour ago. You know why? Because I enjoy fishing. I was sitting on my dock an hour ago, casting a line and catching little mullet that nobody will eat because they're too small. But I was enjoying myself. Just fishing.
Yeah. I think this conversation is good for me, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to go look at my list of 6 or 7 or 8 different writing projects, and I'm going to pick the one that I think will be the most fun to write for me.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to look at it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So Bertold, that's probably means I'm going to work on the jump.
Yes.
And I haven't read parts of the jump. I've read parts of the dime. I've read parts of it. I haven't finished it, but I've read parts of the dime. I have not read anything from the jump, so that would be a surprise to me.
Okay. It's buried somewhere on my blog, the first few chapters.
I think I read them, but I can't remember the details. Although it's sort of a dystopian thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's basically about, I started writing it in, I think, 2015, and it was not intended to be a rumination on a President Trump. But basically it's about an America sometime in the not too distant future that has had an old guy elected president who basically almost immediately declares martial law and takes over the country and just, does horrible things to the people. And it's about a family trying to figure out how to survive and things like that. So.
Well, it's certainly timely.
And the reason why it's fun is because it's basically a story where I can break the rules. There are no rules in this America, so I can just make things up, and some of it's really kind of off the wall and silly, but it's all kind of a reflection of what might happen if something like that were to happen. It could just be completely crazy. So.
That sounds like an interesting story. I think for me, I'm going to probably sift through my computer and pull my eight books and skim them and see if I want to even continue with. The problem with book one is the fact that book one left some, because it was supposed to be a series, left some things undone on purpose. So now I'm committed to tying those things up to some degree in book two, which I wish I had never done. I wish I had made it a standalone. But, now I've got to work those things into my next book, which I have 8 different ways I started doing that. And I think I need to just, and I'm ashamed to say it because like with the ending of the last book, I kind of ended it a little bit more abruptly than I intended to. And I think I'm going to end what happens to those characters a little bit more abruptly so I can get on to the next best thing.
Anybody else have anything to say on the topic?
I guess I'll just reiterate my belief in combining stuff because I've had that work on other occasions where I'll have two sort of half-formed ideas, and then if I take them and combine them, I get something that I'm like, oh, I can actually see a way to write a whole story, a complete thing out of this. And I've also talked to other people who've done much the same thing. I believe, Mark, I know you know, I'm not sure if Audrey or Susan will know, Noah Goetz is another indie author, wrote a book called The Unpublishables, and he did that by essentially combining two separate ideas he'd had.
But you realize the book that you're reading now, Naked Alliances, is sort of like that. There's 2 plot lines in that book. There's the cold case murder, and then there's a sex trafficking ring. And even though that comes together, it's 2 entirely separate things going on.
Gotcha. Yeah.
But I had to do that. And you'll see why.
I
can't wait. I'm enjoying it.
Well, and Susan, I think I know I've told you this. I think when you wrote that book, you absolutely nailed the genre and the type of story you were trying to write. So if you can figure out a way to keep going, that would be a good